and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. I am your host, Scott Daly, and I'm joined, as always, by the most distinguished gentleman I know, Mr. Barry Lyndon. How's it going today, Matty?
Oh, thank you for the invitation. Unfortunately, I must demand satisfaction.
What would you feel if I accused you of being a morally monstrous human being who is indifferent to everything but your own desires?
Well, that's just being a gentleman, isn't it now?
Yes, it kind of is. This week on the show, our Blind Spot series continues as we go through our 10 selected films from the BFI Sight and Sound 2022 critics poll that listed the top 100 films of all time. We've picked 10 of them that we haven't seen, and we are now on, I believe this is your third pick, right? So this will be the fifth one we've done overall. So this is our halfway point.
Sure, I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. Matt, for your third pick, you selected Stanley Kubrick's 1975 film, Barry Lyndon.
Yeah.
We're going to have a lot to say about this movie. I had seen this movie, by the way, but it had been so long ago, and I was so young and stupid, I might as well just not have seen it at all.
Yeah, I may have seen bits of it as well. I don't think I have, but it's possible.
Yeah, so we're going to talk all about Barry Lyndon, and then after that, we have the results of our very important Doof Canon poll on Lars and the Real Girl. We got to talk about that, and then we have some a little bit of box office news talk to do at the end of the episode. I think it's going to be a good time.
Yep,
it's a weird summer. There's some weird things going on as usual.
Love it.
And I think before we get started, I just want to say on the podcast, I wanted to thank Elliot and Ruben for filling in for us last week. I was out of pocket. You were here, but they came on and took over the show and did beautifully. I really loved listening to their Neil Breen episode, despite the fact that I had not seen the movie in question.
It sounds like they had a lot of fun watching that movie.
I was very mad. I was very mad that I missed the movie. It had like a one night showing in Dallas, and I missed it, and so I couldn't participate. But they were able to still record a pretty great episode.
I knew nothing about Neil Breen at all. Like when y'all were planning this, it was like you were speaking Romulan as far as I was concerned. But I learned a lot from their episode about Neil Breen and the Neil Breen phenomenon.
It's fascinating because I don't usually go for that kind of stuff. The so bad it's good type stuff. But Neil Breen is special, and sounds like he has maintained that specialness into his latest film. So check out last week's episode if you haven't yet. Even if you haven't watched the movie, I think it's still just a blast to listen to, and messes with your head because that's what Neil Breen does.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Matt, let's get into our main segment of the week and talk all about Stanley Kubrick's Barry.
The boy must go into hiding just for a short time till matters are blown over.
The poor child has never been away from home in his life.
All clever young fellows who are free and able are hereby invited to step up.
My name is Redmond Barry.
A ruined lad, and send me to the devil.
You are a liar. You're an imposter. You're a deserter.
Matt, what is this movie all about?
An Irish rogue wins the heart of a rich widow and assumes her dead husband's aristocratic position in 18th century England.
Sure, that's what it's about.
That's some of the things that happen, yeah.
This movie, of course, was written and directed by Stanley Kubrick based off the novel by William Makepeace Thackeray. It stars Ryan O'Neal, Marissa Berenson, and Patrick McGee. And this is a Stanley Kubrick film, Matt, which means it's kind of weird and kind of cold and kind of fascinating all at once. What did you think of Barry Lyndon?
Well, I thought it was a great pick, if I may pat myself on the back. I'm glad that I watched it, and it's gonna be in my brain forever. Like it's so interesting. Kubrick is so interesting because it's like such a straightforward story, but the way that he tells it is what kind of lodges in your brain. I'm sure that's a big chunk of what we're going to be talking about.
For sure.
But there's so many different angles you could approach that from. That this is like the thing about all Kubrick is you can write, a dissertation on the cinematography. You can write a totally different dissertation on like the kind of like that coldness that you were mentioning, where it's a sort of narrative voice of the film and how that's accomplished. You can talk about the character, you can talk about ambiguity, you can talk about history. It felt very rich. It was probably one of the most beautiful films I've ever watched. Just incredibly well done, kind of unbelievably well done. Like, just you're watching, people make a lot of the low light filming where they're filming using only natural light, filming using only the light of candles in indoor settings, and that's all very cool. I like it. I thought all those scenes looked amazing. But even outside of that, even if they're outdoors, even if they're in like a room that's lit by light coming in from the windows, many, perhaps most, perhaps all of the scenes in the movie sort of seem like if you took a freeze frame of them, you would have just one of those paintings that you see on the wall of the Louvre. And I think that was the intent, and they certainly pulled it off. I've never really quite seen anything like it. Even modern films with better technology don't quite manage this level of visual beauty on a consistent basis. I'm sure we'll talk about the story a lot, but it was actually the visuals that really blew me away on this first viewing.
Yeah. No, I think that's well said. I agree with just about every point you have there. I think kind of what's happening is I'm really just realizing that Stanley Kubrick is just one of my favorite filmmakers ever. Like, the more we study his stuff and the more we talk about him, I just am like, oh, I just unapologetically love every single one of these movies. And yeah, I mean, I went into this, like I said, I had seen this movie before, but I think it was, a long time ago in college. And I remember being bored. I remember watching this movie and being bored. That's the big memory I had of it. And I was watching this movie today and I was like, how did I think that? I don't think this movie is boring at all. I think this movie is fascinating. And I did know, like, the thing I remembered the most and the thing I went into the most, which is what you said, the big thing is, the big gimmick, I guess, if we want to call it that, of this film is the natural lighting thing, is the fact that, he tries to use non-powered, electric powered lighting as much as possible. It is not true, by the way, that there were no like artificial lights used in the production of this movie at all. That's not true. There were several scenes that he did have to light it artificially. But there are many, many scenes in which he just uses natural light or candlelight, as you said. And those are really effective and they work really well. But yeah, I mean, I was expecting that, but I wasn't expecting, that the rest of the cinematography would just be awe-dropping and incredible. I wasn't expecting that the story would captivate me at the level it did. I wouldn't be wasn't expecting, and I should have been, the idea that, oh, all this stuff is not just an aesthetic choice just because. It's an aesthetic choice that has a reason and ties in with the story and what Kubrick is doing with the story. Actually, it's I don't think I would ever call this like my favorite Kubrick film. Like, I love so many of the other films more. But it's like just a deserving film on this list for sure.
Yeah. It was, while I was watching it, I think I said something to you. I said something like it's the least Kubrickian of the Kubrick films that I've seen, and I kind of was interrogating what I meant by that later, because I was like, it's visually, I think it's doing this very specific thing that he's not doing in the other films. And so, as far as I can remember, there's no Kubrick stare in this movie. It's just sort of a different style, a different affect, and that's what makes it feel stylistically different in a visual sense. But in the story sense, I think it's very Kubrick, because it's despite the fact that it's sort of at times like a swashbuckling adventure, it's always this like sardonic, as you said, cold, detached tone. And it's unclear where exactly that feeling is even coming from.
Yeah.
Just really, really interesting. Like that's the thing that's kind of preying on me, is like, what are we saying exactly? Because there's layers of the story,
Well, let's pick at that, because
Sure.
I think I agree with you. I mean, I think that the fascinating thing about this movie, possibly the most fascinating thing, is I think if you give this story to any other director, it becomes this kind of rollicking, swashbuckling adventure story. I mean, if you break down the plot points of this movie, this is a movie about a man who falls in love with his cousin. She gets engaged to someone else. He challenges the person to a duel, defeats him, but is forced to flee from his home, joins the army, fights in a war, deserts the army, gets caught, joins in another army, deserts that army, like runs around Europe doing a gambling scheme, taking money from rich people, eventually marrying into that same aristocracy, and losing it all. Like, that sounds like a fucking intense, great story. But the way Kubrick films it, it's so flat. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Like, the movie's great. I love the movie. But, like, it's so detached. It's so cold.
Yeah.
There's like, Barry Lyndon is played by Ryan O'Neal, and I'm tempted to insult him as an actor in his performance, because he's so, like, cold and indifferent and flat and, like, non-articulate, except in a few rare cases. And I'm like, is that just the actor's skill, or is that direction, or is maybe a combination of both? Maybe the actor was cast specifically because Kubrick knew he could get this kind of thing out of him. I don't know, but, like, just looking at these, like, there's scenes of war in this movie that are just, like, wide shot, slow scenes of people standing still, casually shooting guns at each other.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, it's designed to be the least exciting, intense fighting you've ever seen on film.
Yeah.
And that's, wow. I just, like, I didn't even know what to do with it. So yeah, let's try to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah, there's a I'm gonna just sort of stake out the position that Kubrick got exactly the performance that he wanted from this actor.
Sure.
And I guess to back that up, I'm gonna say the character of Barry Lyndon, of Redmond Barry as he begins, is a bad person.
Yeah.
And he's manipulative and charming in a very superficial way. And he's very handsome, right? He's very, like, masculine and handsome. And so that does a lot for him. And people constantly take a liking to him, and he, charms them, and then sort of takes them for all they're worth, and then moves along. And none of that is ever, the film never quite says, "Oh, look at this guy. Look at how horrible he is. Let's condemn how bad this guy is." It's very objective. Like, that's another word that you could use along with cold. It's like it's objectively watching him do these things. One moment that jumped out to me, so I think it's sometimes useful to zoom in closer. So, like, the movie's divided into two parts.
Yeah.
And for the first part is more of a swashbuckling adventure, where he's kind of jumping from the frying pan to the fire constantly. And there are definitely a few times where he comes off looking pretty badly. Just where you're like, why did he do, like, he's acting like a huge jerk here, or he's, but it wasn't, for me at least, it wasn't until the beginning of the second part. So it's like the second part begins, like, the first thing that happens is he's sitting in the coach with his new wife, his new noble wife, and he's just married into nobility, and he's smoking this pipe, and she's subtly trying to signal that the pipe smoke is annoying her, and then she asks him to stop smoking the pipe, and then he just basically sneers and blows the smoke directly into her face, on purpose, and then keeps and it's like, oh. And it's so interesting because, like, that's not worse than anything he's done in the movie, but it's definitely just a sign of, like, callous rudeness, and like, sort of lowness that he hasn't quite shown us yet. And I found it kind of, like, delightfully shocking, where it was like, oh, I wondered about this guy, and now you've just confirmed for me that he's a piece of shit. But it took me that long to sort of realize, like, okay, that's the direction we're going with this. This is a story about a guy who sucks, actually.
Yeah.
Up until that moment, it wasn't clear that was the story that this was going to be.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, the thing is, he's gotten what he wants from this woman. You know, what he wanted was the marriage. What he wanted was to buy into this nobility, and he's got that. And so he doesn't give a shit about her anymore and what she wants, and proceeds to cheat on her openly, and doesn't really give a shit about anything. Yeah, you're right. He's a monster. But he's also he's a fascinating character, because I think also what we're doing with this story is showing that he's terrible, but also that the system he's so desperate to join is equally terrible. And like the people that don't like him because he's not a part of that system. You know, like he tries really hard. Like he learns that, if his wife dies, all her fortune goes to her son, and the only way you can switch that is by basically getting, I forget what the term is, but like you basically get like sponsored into the nobility or something.
Yeah.
And so he devotes basically his entire fortune into making that happen, and it never happens. And there's that wonderful scene where he sees the guy he's been trying to win over at dinner, and he's like desperately like trying to like, we'd love if you could come by for dinner sometime, or to play cards. And he's like, I'll check my, it's like a classic, I'll let you know, I'll check my calendar and get back to you.
Yeah. No, that's great. And that of course happens because his stepson sort of challenged him in public, and then he made a big scene by beating the crap out of his stepson, and it embarrassed everyone, and they wanted to distance themselves from him. Whereas, you know, if he hadn't done that intemperate act, it might have actually been fine.
I agree. That's the why, but I don't even know if it would have been fine. Like, I don't think these people wanted him in their club.
Yeah.
I think they wanted to use him. And just like he wanted to use them.
I think that's what's so great about this movie is that's also a fair idea, is that they perpetually saw him as low class. Actually, yeah. I mean, when the king, I think that was the king, right? When the king is sort of walking down this endless row of petty nobles and so forth,
mm-hmm.
And you know, acknowledging them. And you know, his I don't know if that was the guy who was sponsoring him, or just some other friend of his was like, oh yes, this is Master Lyndon. He raised a regiment to send to America to help with the rebels. And the king is like, oh yes, good, raise another one and go yourself. And it was like, it was to my mind, I one thing the movie does actually is it kind of sucks you into the frame of the movie, and you're like, the king, did the king just mean to slight him, or was that just a thoughtless remark? Because you can see in the moment the sort of startlement of Lyndon being like, that's not really the reaction I expected from that interaction. And like, does the king dislike me? And I became very like sensitive to these, like, you know, obviously fictionalized, but like the manners of the court, and you become, you know, especially because all these characters are a hair trigger away from challenging to each other to a duel. You're always like paying attention to like you know, how people are behaving and whether they're going to cross the line or whatever.
No, that's a great point. And can we just point out that like this movie makes something that I've always thought crystal clear, that dueling to solve your problems,
it's a great idea,
is the dumbest fucking idea of all time. No, it's awful. It's awful. Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
They're just standing there 10 paces apart from each other with guns in their hands. What are we doing?
Yeah. I mean, like the funny thing about it is sometimes people jokingly say, or I've been known to jokingly say that people would be way more polite if we could bring back dueling, but it's like, it's not even really true, because the thing that happens in this movie is that people just get really mad, and then they like intentionally insult each other so that they can shoot at each other. And which I was going to bring this up as a thing, is like Barry Lyndon's father is killed in a duel, and then he challenges the one guy to a duel at the beginning of the movie so that because he's in love with his cousin, and apparently his family dislikes him enough that they like arrange for a con where he feels like he won that duel, but actually the guy was fine, and they just got rid of him successfully because they don't like him.
Yeah, well, they didn't want to lose that income, man.
They don't want to lose that income. And also, I think they just recognize that he's this hothead who they just don't want around.
Yeah,
who keeps screwing everything up for them.
He's a liability. Yeah.
And then there's then he ends up fighting a bunch of sword duels that aren't necessarily fatal. And then, of course, there's the duel at the end where, spoilers, he gets shot in the leg by his stepson, which was a very great scene, by the way.
Isn't that the most fascinating choice that the movie makes here? Because like this is a movie about a total shithead, a basically moralless person who is going to do whatever he needs to advance himself at the expense of everyone else. And in this moment, his stepson fucks up and misfires his gun, and he gets a chance to just freely and openly shoot him in the face and keep everything the way he gets it, right? Although I guess would he? I mean, I guess he would, but he instead chooses to do the quote unquote honorable thing, which is shoot the ground, thusly saying, you were wronged, you fucked up, and I granted you pardon, and therefore you should be satisfied now, and we should go away from this thing. Like, Barry Lyndon sucks, but that was a moment of like, I did the right thing,
Yeah. Well, so I felt like that I predicted that he was going to do that. Like that was my feeling of the scene was so I was actually thinking that he was going to die in this duel.
Yeah.
And that he had lost his son. So here's the thing. Again, the movie refuses to moralize because it shows you, like, it shows him being kind of fun and adventurous, and then it shows him being horrible and selfish, but he loves his son.
He does.
He actually loves his son. And the movie is like literally voiceover. He was a good father.
Yeah.
He loved his son. All of his other faults aside, he was a good and caring and sensitive and kind father. And then his son is killed. And I was like broken up by that whole bit. I was like, while simultaneously being like, yeah, I mean, he's a selfish prick, but like nobody deserves to have their child die in an accident that they partially caused. Like that. And so he's just broken. And then the stepson challenges him to a duel. And I almost got the sense that he was like, oh, great, I can die. But I don't know that maybe he wasn't quite that far gone. Maybe, once you've got a gun pointed at you, you kind of change your feelings a little bit. But I think in any way, long story short, I think there was no way he was going to shoot his stepson. I just think that would have been like, what is the point of me if I shoot this kid?
That's totally fair. And you're so right. I mean, I think the one moment in the movie where we see him have like genuine real emotion is when his son dies. And I think it's one of these things where the movie's better for it because like I think we're so firmly rooted in the perspective of Barry Lyndon that's the reason why everything is so objective and cold and indifferent, and is because for most of this he doesn't actually give a shit about anything, and this is the one moment in the movie that feels real and genuine and emotive. And I think that's because this is the one thing in the movie that really breaks Barry Lyndon, really hurts him.
Yeah. And he, just kind of after that point, the rest of the movie is just kind of him like sliding into obscurity with that duel just being the sort of punctuation where he loses his leg, and then it's like, yeah, he's just kind of done. His story is over.
Yep. And I love the ending. I love where it not like I kind of expected this to go to his death. I think the narrator kind of primed it for us to see his death. And I agreed with you. I thought the duel was going to be that moment, but the ending of the movie is just his wife signing his annuity check, Yeah. I think that's just a profound statement of everything he's lost is just these people signing money to him. And that's how we close the movie.
I really love the ending. I really love that sequence, because it's signing the annuity check, but then also just this long shot, and this is very Kubrickian, long shot of her just staring.
Yeah.
and then cuts over to her son, like watching her as she stares into the distance. Again, his face very just like blank.
Yeah.
Cut back to her still staring.
Yeah.
And then finally she like shifts the paper aside and moves on. And that, I love that, because it's for the effect that it has on you. Like that's the genius of Kubrick, because he does these things because he knows he's giving you the opportunity to think, like, look at the consequences of all of this. Like this is the sort of summation of the story that we just watched, is this woman with this giant hole in her life now that he caused. And I don't know, I found that to be just such an incredibly powerful final note for the film to end on.
Yeah. No, I think you're totally right there. It's just it is classic Kubrick. And like, what was the point of all this? What did we learn? What did we accomplish? What happened? Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. None of it. And I think this goes to, I think we kind of started this conversation kind of getting to the bottom of why choose to do this affect in this movie? Like, why choose to do it this way? And I think it's because Kubrick is, I mean, this isn't satire in the way Dr. Strangelove is satire, but I think this is a pretty scathing indictment of this whole system of, like, nobility and aristocracies and the desire and greed for more. And so, like, building a world in which everything is so detached, with everything is so static, like where like people just sit and they look like paintings, it is all, I think, part of this, the creation of this idea of, like, doesn't this just kind of, it's beautiful to look at, but it's dead, it's lifeless, it's soulless. And I think everything that Kubrick does in this movie really reinforces that. The choice to do this natural lighting wasn't just hey, this would be a fun experiment. Let's get some super freaking expensive lenses that only have super shallow depth of field, because folks, I don't know if you know how cameras work. They need light.
Uh-huh.
That's how film works. It needs light to capture the image. And so when you create a situation in which the only light you have is a little tiny candle right there, it doesn't work very well. And you have to get special lenses that are like super light absorbent, so they can let as much light in as possible, so we can actually take the picture. And those lenses have really shallow depth of field. And what does that mean? It means that in these scenes, the characters can't move, because if they move even a little bit, they go out of focus. And so all of this reinforces this idea of this stillness, this I love this objectiveness. I love that. I agree with that totally.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, no, I didn't quite connect that word with the idea of just like, yeah, we're filming this as it would have been, which is a way of being objective. We're not dressing it up by, adding illumination. We're making it clear. Like, that's one way of putting it, is like, we're making it clear that these people are all slathered in this kind of clownish, ugly makeup, and they're wearing these clothes which are like pretty, but like look really uncomfortable and sweaty. And they're in these close, stuffy rooms with 600 candles that have just, that, like, I feel my like throat closing up with just like the fumes and the smells of everyone and their little like patches to cover their smallpox scars.
Yeah.
And you're just like, I like feel my gorge rising, like, and it's like, but it's like beautiful at the same time. It's like, it's that was one thing I was conscious of during some of these scenes, is like, this just looks so like sticky and uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it's like these are the nobles, right?
Yeah.
And it's so often, I think, when we depict in film, when we depict like the upper class of the previous ages, we want to show it as being glamorous, and it's like, well, there was some glamour to it, there was some style to it, but also it was pretty much always uncomfortable for everyone at all times.
Yeah.
And that's
no,
yeah.
I totally agree that the movie is kind of trying to get into this question of, why do you want this so bad, Barry? Like, what is it about this lifestyle that appeals to you so much that you're just willing to betray every person you've ever known to continue to reach for it? And I mean, there are certainly moments in which like you get it, right? Like, there's extravagance here, there's a lot of money, and there's some beauty in it, but yeah, there's also these unapologetically objective viewpoints of how much this sucks and how gross it is. It is. There's multiple moments where I agree with you. It just felt gross. I did not want to be in this room. I did not want to be in these with these people. It's fantastic.
Yeah, that's I hadn't even really put that together until we were talking just now, but I just the awareness of the physicality of it, I think, is of everything just across the whole movie is enhanced by the lighting choices. I wanted to the battle you mentioned earlier was just so fascinating, because I almost want to say it's like the best battle scene I've ever seen, while also, like you said, feeling totally inert. Because it's just we're so used to seeing battle scenes that are like filmed in a way to be dramatized, right? And there's a lot of cutting, there's a lot of close-ups to the heroes, and this was all, again, now that we found this word, I'm gonna keep going back to it. It was like this objective, almost documentarian style of filming a battle, 1800s battle, with like the lines of men walking grimly toward each other, the other line of men, standing, waiting, shooting, you pop, 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 still walking, charging muskets, pop, 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 and oh no, people are hit. But it's also still not really dramatized.
Yeah,
and it's so interesting. Again, I feel myself drawn to like talk about the minutia of it, because it's not that Barry is like thoroughly despicable, because he saves the like superior officer, like carries him off the battlefield, and then when it's obvious he's dying, Barry gives him like a kiss, and then just like weeps over his dead body, and there's nobody there to like perform for, so it's just a genuine display of emotion. But even that is like shot from this like distant, like mid not wide, it's like a middle range shot, very like distant, and we're just like watching him cry, and it's again not like not dramatized, at least not in the language of what the camera is doing. It constantly leaves me like questioning,
I mean, he's not a sociopath, right? Like, I think he genuinely like cares for people, like certain people. Like, I don't think like he's crying in that moment for his lost opportunity. I think he's genuinely sad the man is dead now. One of the only people that seem to like him. I think that's true, but at the same time, he would. I fully think that this man he would have cried over when they got shot, he would have also immediately betrayed if he saw an advantage to it to get him closer to what he wanted to. Like, I think there are multitudes when it comes to Barry Lyndon, and he can be the absolute best of people and the absolute worst of people, because I mean, he saves in the other battle sequence when he's with I forget which country it is, where the house gets hit with the cannon fire and that beam collapses on that guy. He saves that guy too, and he ends up getting advantage from that, right? Like, it helps propel him forward. But I don't think, or at least I don't feel like the movie made it clear in that moment that was a calculated choice of, oh, if I save this guy, then I could get a medal or something out of it and then advance my station. I think he just saw someone needed help and he helped them.
I agree. I mean, he certainly has like the classic qualities of physical bravery. We never see him act cowardly at any point, really. So it's like there are certain admirable virtues in him. He's just a climber and a gold digger and manipulative. it's just a very complex character that I guess I kind of see why Kubrick was attracted to this story, because that was one thing it's one unformed question I had walking into it, was like 2001: A Space Odyssey, epic, world-changing, incredibly strange and ambiguous story. A Clockwork Orange, uh, violence and extremely interesting thematic content. And then we have a period piece about a dude who fought in some wars and married some women.
A very traditional period piece, you would think from the outside, like just a period piece of like in the classic, I think, 19th century literature idea of we're just going to follow this man from his birth to his death. Like it just doesn't feel extraordinary or remarkable in any way.
There's nothing on paper that seems that attractive about it, but there's this complexity and ambiguity and just like realism, I think is the word to this character, where it's like, like everybody, there's some good stuff about him. There's a lot of bad stuff about him. He suffers. I leave you to figure out how to feel about this.
Yeah, I mean, in that regard, I think it's the perfect 1970s film, right? This is such indicative of what this decade in film was, of like no heroes. This isn't a guy that you're going to look up to, but it's not a guy you're going to hate either. We're just going to present him to you, and you decide what you think. I mean, we see like the movie, by the fact that he loses everything at the end, basically, and is like legless and banned from the country, and is just receiving a small salary each year. Like he's alone, he's destitute, and he's miserable. Like that is making a moral judgment on his behavior, kind of, right? Because it's just the way it's presenting the consequences of his actions.
So yes, but I guess my asterisk on that would be like, that's from the book, right? Like the book. Okay, so let me step back for a second. So like this is from a book called The Luck of Barry Lyndon, which is a little bit different, by the way, but the basic strokes are the same. And it seems to me that the basic sort of, genre of this book is like a morality play. It's like, let's look at this guy, kind of sucks, and then he gets what he deserves. And that's the kind of book that it is. And there's a lot of stories like this. But I think that the film isn't endorsing that sense of like, look at this piece of shit, he got what he deserved, huh? Like it left me feeling a little bit more ambiguous at the end.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think that's fair, and I think that is very Kubrickian. I think one of the fascinating things about Kubrick to me is I don't think of him as an adapter, right? Like I don't think of him that way. But when you look at his filmography, that's what he does. Like the majority of the films he's done have been adaptations, and it's fascinating that like he does this, but he also always said, "Oh, this is a really interesting story. I'm going to adapt it." But in the strong tradition of The Shining, I am going to completely change it to do what I'm more interested in here. Like in The Shining, King is doing a very specific thing with this book, and I'm going to take that, but I'm going to put my worldview on it. And I think you're right here. In Barry Lyndon, he takes what is this rather simple, this guy sucks, let's watch him lose everything, and we'll learn something about the correct ways to behave, and says, I'm not really interested in that in particular.
Yeah. It's a sort of modern, or at least 1970s reapproachment, or however you say that word, of this morality play from 100 years ago, and it works as that. Like, just by the way, I really enjoyed the movie. It was 3 hours long, and I was like glued to the screen. It was very, and it's like that's the most interesting. This may be the most interesting thing about Kubrick to me, is like I don't even know why I was glued to the screen. Like usually I can give a pretty easy breakdown of like, oh well, it's just basic storytelling, and I'm like, well, where, like, this movie didn't have basic storytelling. Like it's actually just this meandering. It's not plotless, but it's not structured. He does many things in a row, one thing leading to the next, almost episodically.
Yeah.
There's a whole interlude where he just like he's being a deserter and he seduces like a German farm wife.
Yeah.
And just stays with her for a while and then leaves. And there's no consequence to this. It's just like showing you the kind of guy he is and the kind of world this is. And that's the kind of thing that happens in the movie over and over. And yet I was riveted by it. And that's always the amazing thing.
Yeah. I wish I had a simple, answer for like, well, it's because of this, but I agree with you. Like every way I've described this movie would lead me to believe I wouldn't like it. Distant, cold, objective, indifferent. That would all lead me to think, oh, this is going to be a boring movie. But it's never that. It's never, and certainly part of that is the cinematography. Certainly part of that is the beauty with which Kubrick and his DP shoot this film. That like you can't stop looking at it because every bit of it is so beautiful and fascinating and intentional. But that in other movies that wouldn't be enough for me. That wouldn't get me there. And yet here with this guy, for some reason, I'm just in. I'm just totally in.
I think part of it is that we're constantly asking ourselves, like, all right, what is this guy going to do next?
Yeah.
And I think that was the through line that I was mentally following because there's that ambiguity about like, what kind of guy is this that we're following, that we're attached to? Like sometimes he's brave and admirable, but oh man, God, why did he do that? Okay, well maybe things will pick up, and like you kind of want him. I think actually that's why the final scene where he throws away his shot in the duel felt like a win. Like it felt like a big win to me, because I was like, if he shoots the kid, then that will just mean that he was always just a monster and he never really had any humanity to him at all. And all of the times, all the moments when we saw humanity from him, it was all just performance and manipulation. But he threw away the shot and you're like, okay, he's not a total monster. And then you kind of slightly feel bad for him when he gets shot in the leg a little bit.
Yeah.
Although you also kind of feel like he deserves it. Anyway, the point is, yeah, I think that was why I cared, is I wanted to see the guy redeem himself or show his quality, maybe is a better word. I wanted him to be the good guy, and by keeping it ambiguous whether he's a good guy or an awful guy, or a monster, it's more like it's not ambiguous whether he's a good guy or a bad guy. He's clearly not a good guy, but it's like, is he a charming rogue who we can is he a kind of a Jack Sparrow, or is he another comparison I was making in my head is like the Frank Abagnale character in Catch Me If You Can, which that character is also sort of portrayed sympathetically, but it's like what brand of rogue do we have here? Do we have a ruthless psychopath rogue, or do we have a rogue with a heart of gold where we can be on his side? And that's what kept me invested.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I mean, even if you're like not sure if he's going to do the right thing, I think the idea of what you said there of what is he going to do next, I think is really fascinating, because like, are we about to see him do the next horrible thing or do something good, and you're never quite sure, and so that carries you scene to scene. I think it's interesting. One of the things the movie does, we spoke already about the reaction to his son's death and the power of that scene. I think it's really interesting that the movie makes it pretty clear before the son dies that the son's gonna die, right?
Yeah.
Like it just, through the narrator, we're just told, nope, his kid's gonna die, and he's actually gonna die. Barry Lyndon himself is gonna die penniless and childless. And that's a really interesting choice, because then, like, once again, Kubrick chooses to do the least dramatic, exciting thing, which is the unknown of what's going to happen to his son. Like even after the accident with the horse, like we're just like, we've been primed to just immediately be like, oh, so this is how he dies. Okay. And there's no like Hitchcockian bomb under the table moments in this movie at all. There's no suspense in this movie at all. It's just, it kind of tells us what's going to happen, and then we're just kind of shaking our head at, wow, that did happen. Wow.
Yeah. I think for me, what it did is, from the moment we learned that the kid was going to die, it kind of colored everything that happened up until the kid dies, because I was like, oh, well, that sucks. Like I said a minute ago, like it doesn't matter how like bad this guy is. Nobody deserves for their kid to die. That's just too much. And so I was like, I started to kind of reorient and be like, man, poor guy, poor guy. I think that in and of itself is one of those interesting things that Kubrick films force you to realize, is that you're able to like change my perception of a character by having something bad happen to them. And which I guess is happening in storytelling all the time. It's just particularly sort of clear here.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I think there's also something to this idea that, like, I think in Barry's mind, his son was kind of like his opportunity, like a new chance for the life that he wanted himself to live. Like he's tried to break into the system for so long. He births the son, and the son he sees himself in the kid a lot, and this ability to finally be a part of this aristocracy, this role, this level of this class of people. And then his son dies, and that's all taken from him. And I think it is interesting that, like, the reason his son dies is because he doesn't freaking listen.
Yeah, just like Barry.
Yeah, exactly. The same thing. I think that the movie says this about his gambling, right? The same things that make him like good at amassing a fortune via his gambling stuff are the same things that make him squander it. And I think it's similar to with his son, like the same things that make him, great at climbing this ladder also make him really easy to fall off of it. And he instilled these values on his son. And part of it is just simple, like they spoiled the shit out of this kid, right? He was just like, I think nothing says spoiled more in my in my estimation than a sheep drawn carriage rolling across your lawn for your 9-year-old or your 8-year-old birthday or whatever it was.
The ridiculous birthday parties. The moment where I thought it was pretty nice foreshadowing when the nurse is like, blow out your candles, and the kid's like, I'm afraid of the dark, and Barry's like, you can leave the candles on, and it's like, yeah, that's dangerous.
Yeah.
that's a risk that you're trying to be nice to your son, but you're actually introducing danger.
Yeah. Well, the world that Barry wants to live in is a world where he gets whatever he wants.
Yeah,
like that's his draw to these type of people in the system, is that he looks at these people and they can do whatever they want. They can get whatever they want. If they want a wife, they can get a wife. If they want money, they can get money. If they want a fancy house, they just get it. And so his son is like the ultimate distillation of that idea, because he's a kid that has been trained by his parents to get whatever he wants. I think that the scene where his son finds out about the horse is so great, because he's just like, he assumes that his dad got it for him.
Yeah.
He enters the conversation. Did you buy that horse for me? And his birthday's in like a week. And he's just like, well, I said I wanted it, and so I'm just going to guess that you got it for me.
Right. Yeah. I love this articulation that you've drawn here, that what he wants is a world where you get whatever you want. Mm-hmm. And that his son is him trying to make that a reality, at least for his son, so that his son can have, genuinely have a better life than him, right? That's I think that's exactly what it is. Yeah.
But the horse is a metaphor for the aristocracies, and they will not let you up on them. They will toss you off violently.
I don't know if you're joking or not, but that makes perfect sense. That's like, yeah, that's exactly right.
I mean, I am joking in a way that, like, I think this is great metaphor that I think works for the argument we're making. I don't think it was intentional that way, but
well,
I think it's great.
I mean, if you say it that way, it sounds silly, but it actually makes perfect sense. That it's like, yeah, you think you can do anything, but then there are some things that actually you try to do it, and they're deadly. And the world doesn't necessarily warn you in advance. So yeah, it is a metaphor for his own downfall.
Yeah, and the people he leaves in his wake. Like, I think his poor wife is like just this absolutely tragic character, right?
Yeah,
just like this poor woman.
Yeah, true. I mean, everything about her from the moment we meet her is like this. So that's I want to take that opportunity to talk about the side characters, or more specifically, I mean, any character who's not the protagonist, I want to just talk about, because one interesting thing you notice about Kubrick movies is that, like, the protagonist is often like a weirdo, like either Tom Cruise in Eyes Wide Shut, where he's like, it's like the most boring Tom Cruise performance in some ways.
Yeah, and yet somehow one of the best. I don't know how.
And yet somehow one of the best. Like Full Metal Jacket, you've got this like kind of mumbly, detached dude who's the protagonist. I'm not going to go through all of these. I mean, 2001 is probably the best example, where the characters are just like totally bland on purpose.
Oh, you mean where the most human character in that entire movie is the robot?
Exactly, and that's exactly the point I was going to make. Is that the protagonists of his film are often extremely wooden, on purpose, and then all the side characters are these amazing character actors doing incredible fun things. So like, I thought this, and not just that, but like having their own like dramatic stories that are happening around the edges. Like, I thought The Stepson was an incredibly dramatic performance, character. Like from the moment he enters the story as a kid, he's like interesting, and you empathize with his struggles and his anger. Even when he's kind of being a little shit, it's like understandable, even admirable in some ways, that he's standing up to this jerk who's invaded his life.
Yeah, I mean, part of that is that he's just got Barry pinned perfectly. Like, he just knows exactly what he wants and what he's about, and he's right. And the movie shows us he's right, and so we're immediately like, oh yeah, this is a smart kid, actually.
Yeah, the kid is great. The wife is great. Various of his like mentors, I love those characters. They're all they're just fun. They're just doing a great job. I mean, it's almost too many to mention. There's so many characters in this movie, actually, and there's so many, even down to like the bandit who robs him on the street. It's like this really fun performance, and unique character who's in the movie for like 5 minutes. There's just so much of that in this movie. That's maybe one of the most entertaining things about the movie, is all these tangential characters and the amazing performances.
Yeah, and I think, again, Kubrick is too detail driven for that to be like an accident, right? It's like, oh, I cast this guy for the looks, and I couldn't get the performance out of him I wanted. No, that's not how Stanley Kubrick works, right?
Right.
He got the exact performance out of this kid he wanted, and so like everything comes together in that regard. This was, by the way, a 300-day shoot is how long it took him to film this movie, which is insane, absolutely insane.
Wow. I wonder why.
I just think he's meticulous. I just think like he's a meticulous director, and this is a meticulous movie where, like, again, you place limitations on yourself, like lighting and focal lengths and all these things, and you have an already very strict, meticulous director, and then suddenly you need people to hit their marks perfectly or they're out of focus, and then like you need them to say that line perfectly in that way that demonstrates this, as you said, objective indifference. And suddenly you're taking way longer than you needed to.
I like that. Yeah, that's a good explanation. Maybe that's why everybody looks miserable all the time, is that they're on take 57.
Yeah, definitely. There is like I think we haven't the costuming won an Academy Award as it should have, right? The costumes in this film are beautiful. The makeup work is really good as well. You already talked about the smallpox scar hiding, like it's such a great, like it's taking what is period accurate and then using it to show these people when they look really terrible. Like it's like, oh, you look pale and sickly. No, that's just my makeup, but I'm doing a good job demonstrating that the character is in a state that they feel pale and sickly. It's just really, really effective, and it also makes you question like why these styles existed in the first place.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think I even while watching the movie, I was thinking like it can't be pleasant to have this amount of like effort put into your appearance, right? And it's like wearing the makeup and so forth, like it can't be comfortable, so like why do it? And it's like, well, that's the fashion. It's to demonstrate that you're of this class and that you're better than all those other people who don't slather their face in makeup. And like it really is about that. Like that's so much of what this movie is about this human drive to be part of the upper crust of society, even if it like actually sucks and everyone's miserable.
Yeah.
And you can see that, and everyone can see that. Everyone can see that everyone else is miserable, but you gotta be part of the upper crust, or else who are you? What are you? You're nothing.
Yeah, no, well said. I completely agree.
It's good stuff.
Anything else you wanted to say about Barry Lyndon?
No, I just that I'm glad we talked about this, because I walked away from the movie not really knowing I enjoyed it, knowing that I would be picking at it for a while, but not really having much articulated about it in my mind. So I really enjoyed hashing it out with you.
Yeah, worth noting, this is number 44 on the BFI list. It's actually tied for 45th with two other movies, North by Northwest, the Hitchcock film, and The Battle of Algiers, the 1966 Italian film. 45 feels right to me.
Sure.
I wonder if this is... I'm scrolling through the list right now to see if this is the highest Kubrick film. It seems like it might be. No. 2001 is number 6. Okay. That kind of makes sense.
Yeah, just for all sorts of reasons. Yeah,
it does make it, I think, the second highest Kubrick film. I think every Kubrick film appears. This list, by the way, we're talking about the top 100, but this list goes to 225, and I think every Kubrick film is on this. The ones in the top 100 are The Shining, Barry Lyndon, and 2001.
All right. Well, glad we watched it. Yeah.
Surprised that Eyes Wide Shut isn't on here, actually.
Yeah. I think I need to rewatch that movie.
Yeah, I want us to do an episode on it one day, because I would love to dive into it. It's a fascinating movie. This is a movie, Matt, that literally destroyed the marriage of two people. Like legitimately destroyed their marriage. Yeah. And like you can watch it happen on film. You can watch Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise begin to hate each other.
And Kubrick did it to him too. He was like I'm gonna ruin you. So I speaking of Kubrick generally, I like this is the perfect intro to Kubrick movie, because like every other movie of his is weird.
True.
Barry Lyndon is kind of a normal movie that's stylized in a Kubrick way, but it's not overbearing. So I would, if I literally think that it would be a great introductory movie for people who either haven't watched Kubrick, or maybe have watched Kubrick and are like don't get it maybe, or find it difficult to connect.
No, that's a great point, because I think you have seen movies like this before, possibly. Now you've never seen a movie quite like this,
Yeah,
you know, like,
but
but of a similar, you know, structure and goal,
genre, and
right, yeah. You know, it's not a good first Kubrick movie.
What?
A Clockwork Orange at 2:00 a.m. when you're 12 years old, can't sleep, and just turn on HBO and there's this weird movie on. You don't know what the fuck's going on.
There's a lot of stories like this from you, aren't there?
There are. I used to have a lot of trouble sleeping, and I would just go into my living room, turn on the TV, and watch whatever happened to be on the movie channels.
That's I agree. That's not a good idea.
No. And then I remember like having a conversation with my dad not too long after that, and him going, I was like, he started talking about something, and he started talking about Clockwork Orange. He said, "You're a little too young for that one. You'll have to watch it when you're older." And me just thinking, already did that, Dad.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
Oh, parenting.
Wonderful. All right. Well, that is your third pick. I think from here we are moving on to my third pick, which is a French movie called Playtime. It's a Jacques Tati movie. It's a comedy, but it's also supposed to be weird as shit and wonderful. So I'm looking forward to that one a whole lot.
Okay, great.
I think that's gonna be next week. I think we're gonna do that. Yeah, next week.
Doof.
But before we go, Matt, we have a couple brief bits of homework we have to do. The first thing we have to do is a couple weeks ago we did an episode for our Canon on Lars and the Real Girl, a movie that I think I boldly said is one of the best movies we've ever covered on that particular show. You really liked it too, as well.
I think we had a really fun conversation about that one, and getting to talk about it with you reminded me of how much I love that movie. Yeah,
great. Well, we put it up for a vote, and our listeners in numbers that are a little lower than our typical votes, we induct it into the canon.
Okay, excellent.
93% of our listeners agreed and inducted Lars and the Real Girl into the canon. It was really great because we got a lot of comments from people, Matt, that were like, "Oh my God, I love this movie. Nobody ever talks about it. I feel like nobody's seen it. But every time I come across someone who's seen it, they just unabashedly love it and talk about how much it's changed their life." And that was that echoed the sentiment that I think we both had.
Yeah. There were so many stories that took the basic form. Yeah, I found a DVD behind a dumpster and we watched it as a joke, and then it made us all cry. So I'm glad everyone has this experience with this movie. Hopefully our discussing it causes more people who have been writing it off due to how weird it looks to give it a watch, because it's one of my favorite movies.
Nothing would make me happier. And that's I think the real tragic thing about this movie is, like, it works because you think it looks weird and it's actually beautiful and heartfelt.
Yeah.
But that same thing is what keeps people away from it. And like, I wouldn't want to change that at all, but I wish we could find a way for more people to take a look at this thing.
Me too.
But welcome, Lars and the Real Girl. Welcome, Ryan Gosling. I think that's our first Gosling entry.
Yeah. I was going to say, one way to get more people to watch Lars and the Real Girl would be for Ryan Gosling to become really popular. I mean, more so than he already is, by being in a really big hit of some kind.
You mean Warner Brothers' most successful film of all time?
Oh, really? Wow.
Do you know that's true?
No, I did not actually. That's
it's made more money than any Warner Brothers film ever.
That's hilarious. That is actually very surprising.
Than the Harry Potter movies. It's made more money than Harry Potter.
Because
not in total, but
right. Because I knew Barbie was doing well, but that's just a whole nother level.
It's just shy of $1.4 billion.
Yeah.
Which is just insane. Which is, I think you did it, Matt. You wonderfully transitioned to what I wanted to talk about next, which is, it's past Labor Day now. We've moved away from summer. We are officially in fall movie season. We're not officially in fall yet. I don't think we've hit that actual change yet, but that doesn't matter. So we have a chance to look back at the year so far. It was weird, Matt. There was these big strikes going on for most of it, and that made things a little weird. But we have Barbenheimer, which is still the most insane thing that's ever happened.
I'm so happy. It did bring back this like joy around going to see movies, because I get tired of being cynical and jaded about the film experience and everything, because I like movies and we like movies. So it felt like a real sea change that we had these two really good movies, really unique, unusual movies that were well made, that were made by people with visions behind them, and then were properly marketed. I can't emphasize that enough, because that is my hobby horse that I always talk about when we talk about movie receipts. Is you'll tell me, this movie did horribly, and I'm like, yeah, it looked horrible and it deserves to do horribly, but when you make a good movie and then you market it properly, it's gonna do okay. And if you market it really well and you have this crazy Barbenheimer phenomenon, which I doubt that they did on purpose and I doubt that they predicted, but anyway, it amplified. The two amplified each other, you could say. They almost like fed on each other's marketing in a really unique way.
Yeah, no, I agree. Everyone's talking about the Barbie half of this, and that's because this, like we said, most successful Warner Brothers film of all time, $1.4 billion, huge. I think the Oppenheimer half of this is almost becoming more fascinating to me, because as we speak right now, Oppenheimer is currently the third highest grossing film of the year, at $854 million. It has beat Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, Fast X, Spider-Man Across the Universe, The Little Mermaid, Mission Impossible, Ant-Man, Transformers, John Wick. It beat all these movies. It's a 3-hour biopic. That's insane.
It is. I would not have predicted that.
No.
That is, I mean, and that's great. Like, I think people, there are a lot of reasons it's overdetermined. But I think one interesting thing about Oppenheimer is it's a story that everybody is fascinated by, and that nobody knew they were fascinated by it until Chris Nolan made a movie, and it was like, oh,
sure,
yeah, that does sound like, because it's almost like this taboo topic, the bomb, and or at least it's a downer, right? It's a downer, so nobody makes movies about it, but everybody's thinking about it, everybody's always in the back of your mind, and it's sort of World War II is an era everybody always wants to go back to. So
no, it's really cool, because World War II is this one era that we really enjoy telling stories in, because we get to be like, this is unambiguous, because fuck the Nazis, yay us, we did it. And then of course we spend a lot less time in the Pacific Theater, and I think part of that is at least because of how that war ends and the thing we did, and the weird gray area where we sit between, well, it was definitely bad, but so would yada 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 yada. I should say I still haven't seen Oppenheimer, so I'm basically just using supposition at this point to see what the message of the film is. But yeah, I mean, I do think it's this really interesting thing that part of me is like, I don't even know if it's that this is a story about the atomic bomb that is the reason people went and saw this movie. Like, it's just this weird thing. Like, I feel like the people behind Oppenheimer really need to call up the marketing team at Barbie and just thank them profusely, because it became this thing where you have to participate in both, and that requires you seeing this movie that you probably never would have seen otherwise. Like I remember talking to my sister-in-law before Oppenheimer came out, and she's like, what is this about? It's like a big explosion or something. I'm like, that. But I think a lot of people that went and saw this movie had that same, I'm not even sure what this is about, but it's part of this phenomenon, and therefore I have to be part of it.
That's fascinating. And I think you're right too. I didn't mean to say that like there's a deep hunger for a film about the atomic bomb and the American psyche. I mean, I kind of think there is, but I don't think that drove hundreds of millions of dollars of ticket sales.
I think that's exactly it. There is, but not $850 million worth of there is for sure.
Yeah. And I absolutely, so like agree with what you just said. Like it was almost like both films pooled their marketing for a film called Barbenheimer that doesn't exist. And then everyone who heard about one heard about the other, and therefore they benefited each other.
Yeah. Isn't this so cool? This is so cool because like it's a thing that we rarely see anymore, which is movies being the center of popular culture.
Yeah.
And like that's a cool feeling again because it just doesn't happen anymore.
It is. And like in a good way too. Like
that's true.
Sometimes movies are the center of popular culture and you wish they weren't, but yeah, I agree. It makes me happy.
The big losers of the summer though are sequels and franchise films. Like bad, Matt. I think, Fast X ended up doing $700 million, which is still pretty good. It's probably not as much as they hoped for. But enough that they're definitely making the sequel. The Little Mermaid, I think, disappointed. It did $570 million, which is again a lot of money, but I think they expect these live action remakes of beloved cartoons to pull in over $1 billion, and it just seemed like people didn't care about that one.
Yeah.
Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1, $560 million. Not great. Not for they spent $150 million extra on this one to get lower than the last one. Not what they want. I still have a theory that the sequel to this, the second part, is going to do very, very well. And the problem this movie had was that Part 1 in its title scared a lot of people away.
Yeah, that feels right to me. It's interesting because part of me is surprised that one did poorly, but then I realized that I didn't actually go see it. So, and I like these Mission Impossible movies. I wanted to see it in theater. It just wasn't the top priority, So, I do wonder how much of it is like, well, wait, how close to Barbie and Oppenheimer's release was it?
It was the week before. That was the big problem. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So I imagine it might have done much better. People like me would have gone to see it, except instead we went to see Barbie, and then the next weekend we went to see Oppenheimer. Or something like that. So
biggest loser, The Flash.
The Flash.
Yep. $268 million. By the way, that is on HBO Max now, or sorry, just Max. I watched the first hour of it. It's so bad.
Yeah.
It's so bad. There's so many things where I'm like, what the fuck are we doing here? And I need to finish it. I'm gonna force myself to finish it to see if it redeems itself by the end. But it's awful, man. It's really awful.
Yeah, I'll probably put it on at some point just to have the experience. But
just so we're clear, The Flash earned less money than Green Lantern, the Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern movie. This is not adjusted for inflation. This is money. It just earned less money.
Wow. That's bad.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah. Well,
pretty bad.
They've already decided they're rebooting all that shit, but I don't even know if that's going to save him at this point, because I think
I don't know.
I think the faith is gone.
Yeah. The Blue Beetle movie, by the way, that we were so positive on. $105 million. Yeah. Not great. Yeah. Not great.
I didn't even know that was out. So
yeah, it came and it's gone. It's gone.
Wow, that was fast.
It got beat. It got beat by a movie called Detective Conan: Black Iron Submarine.
That doesn't sound right to me. Is that real?
Yeah.
I've never heard of that. And
it's an anime.
I want to watch it.
It's an anime.
I want to watch it.
It came out in Japan. Earned most of its money in Japan, but still earned more than Blue Beetle.
Fascinating.
So that's the summer. A weird one, and we're moving into a fall in which most of the big films are being pushed and delayed, like Dune. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. So I don't know what this fall is going to look like. I know like a bunch of the festivals, the fall festivals are happening right now. Like Venice happened last week, Telluride happened last week, and there's good movies at them. They're, independent films, a lot of which are going to appear on streaming services. So there's going to be good movies moving into the end of this year, but it's not the big ones, not the big boys.
Yeah,
they're all getting moved, except for Aquaman 2 somehow. It's still it's not moving.
Okay, good.
Did you know the first Aquaman movie made $1 billion? Isn't that wild?
I did. I never saw. I still haven't seen it. I think Jason Momoa has a lot of star power. Actually,
yeah, you're right.
That's part of it.
Yeah. One thing I will say here is, just can't get over how bad the Flash is. I'm sorry. I was talking and then I was just thinking in my head about how terrible the Flash was.
Yeah.
One of the things I did want to talk about here as we round out this section is the weird thing that's happening at these film festivals. So Emma Stone, Emma Stone, she's an actress.
Sure. Yep.
She has a movie coming out very, very, very soon. And she was at a Telluride, a film festival. Now Matt, she went as just a guest.
Sure.
Like not a guest. No, she as just like a normie. She bought a ticket with her own money. She just went to watch movies at the film festival.
Okay.
Now it just so happens that her film was premiering at that film festival. The movie she's in that she's not allowed to promote because of the strike going on right now. There's a new Yorgos Lanthimos film. It's called Poor Things. She's the star. Premiered at that festival. Got very good reviews. And she did not promote it, but she was at the festival. And so people wrote about how she was at the festival. And then because they were writing about how she was at the festival, they should write about her movie that's also at the festival. And you're like, when are we crossing a line here, actually? Is this like, what's the guild going to feel about this kind of gamesmanship of the rules?
I don't know. Yeah, ask for forgiveness instead of permission. It's probably the attitude there. Yeah, I mean, who knows? If there's... I don't know how to think about these things. Like, are you really going to tell somebody, no, you can't go to a film festival? I don't know. I literally have no thoughts on this because it seems like something where you could probably make an argument from both sides. And I guess I don't really see the particular harm in it, but I also see the point that you're making. So,
yeah, I mean, and the same thing is happening with Bradley Cooper, by the way, who his film premiered last week. His film Maestro premiered last week at the Venice Film Festival. And I don't think he went to the Venice Film Festival, but like Bradley Cooper doesn't do interviews very often. And like randomly, he just did an interview. Not about this movie. He's not allowed to promote the movie. Just a check-in.
Yeah.
On Bradley Cooper.
If anybody wants to hear how I'm Bradley Cooper am doing.
And so I'm just going to get my name out there again. Yeah. And then, if that makes you check out this new movie that I made.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah. I'm just going to start kicking the air over here. And if you happen to step into the way, that's your own fault.
Oh, it's fascinating stuff, man. Fascinating stuff. That Maestro, by the way, is a Netflix film. It's going to be on Netflix. So there's a lot of Apple TV and Netflix movies that are happening. Which has me excited because I'm about to have a new kid and definitely not gonna be able to go to the theater anytime soon.
Yeah.
Doof. But anyway, that is all I want to talk about summer box office. I think you had something you wanted to briefly talk about. Speaking of things that we can watch at home.
Yeah, very briefly, just with essentially zero fanfare. Amazon has dropped the first 3 episodes of the Wheel of Time TV show season 2 on streaming. I had no idea it was coming. All of my friends who are also Wheel of Time fans were equally like, "Hey, did you see? There's Wheel of Time it's out now.
Yeah.
People were texting me. I was texting people. It was, and you know, I'm enjoying. I enjoyed these 3 episodes. I probably just like straightforwardly enjoyed them more than I enjoyed the first season, even though I didn't hate the first season by any means.
Mm-hmm.
They were just kind of like these episodes are just kind of in a groove that I got. A lot of the internet complaining about the show is making me like it more, because when people make stupid criticisms of things, I instinctively rebut those criticisms, which then ends up bolstering my appreciation for the things they're doing in this show. They're making a lot of changes, and I'm like always happy with the changes. And it's also keeping me more engaged, because instead of just being like, yep, there's that plot point, I'm like, oh, they changed that. So are they still going to do this? And it keeps me, I'm watching a story I haven't seen before, in other words. Except they usually hit like the highlights, but they hit the highlights in like a different way, where the character moment is still honored, while simultaneously the surrounding situation is often changed quite a bit. So anyway, yeah, it's good show. A lot of people disagree with me. That's cool. I don't care. That's where we are. Yeah,
it's one of those weird things where I think, we did a whole episode about the first season of the show, and I think we were all pretty positive on it, including both you and Malia, like, who were both book readers, who liked it quite a bit. And then, like, I feel like we didn't really check up on what the overall thought on it was and release that episode, and then nobody agreed with us at all. And then a similar thing happened with the Rings of Power show, where just like nobody agrees with our take, and it's a weird place to be. But yeah, I enjoyed the first season quite a bit. I'm anxious to check this out.
Yeah, there's definitely like different populations of people who watch, and you're always going to hear from the people who really love the source material and get really mad when you change things. And like that's who you're going to hear from. You're not necessarily going to hear from people like me, except in rare situations like this, where I'm like, yeah, Wheel of Time, it's an okay book series. It's probably my like 7th favorite fantasy book series. So all the changes they're making, I'm like, hey, good. These are all improvements. So anyway,
yeah, I think that's good. It does remind me of this, one of the things in this ongoing writer strike that's happening right now. One of the arguments the studios are making, these streamers are making, is you don't want us to be fully transparent with how much people are watching this stuff. This idea that, like, if we do that, it's going to ruin everything. Because everyone's going to realize that nobody's watching these things. And this feels like one of those shows to me where I'm not saying nobody's watching it. I think the numbers on this show, as compared to how much money they're spending on the show, are probably very bad.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that in this world, and by the way, I want to say that I'm not siding with the studios on this one. I think more transparency in this kind of stuff is always probably a good thing overall, even if it has a net negative impact short term. But it is really interesting that, like, when these numbers are sealed in secret, every show on every platform gets to pretend like it's a hit show.
Yeah.
And this change would make investors like current stockholder, like all these people be like, you spending $30 million an episode and 20,000 people are watching it. Really? So I don't know. This like the lack of fanfare in this thing, as you said, the fact that it just dropped and I saw no trailers, I saw no announcements, I saw nothing except I booted up Amazon Prime one day and it said new episodes of Wheel of Time out now, and I'm like, oh, okay. I think it's part of that same deal. I don't think a lot of people are watching this show.
I agree. I mean, I think that the people like me who've read the books are disproportionately likely to read it. Let me put it this way: everyone I know who's watching the show is a book reader.
Sure.
And there can't possibly be all that many book readers. So,
yeah, not enough to justify spending the kind of money they're clearly having to spend on this thing, because it's just very extravagant and big.
It is. Yes, it is.
It's wild. It's a wild place we live in. Like I don't want things like this to go away. Like I think more transparency is good, but I also want billion-dollar companies to continue just churning through their money on making these things that only 16 people are watching.
Yeah, I agree. Like, that's the thing. I'm glad this exists, even if it's not like my perfect dream adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's cool that it exists. And if they stop, midway before finishing the series, I'll be kind of bummed, because it's like, oh great, another thing that was aborted halfway through and failed and leaves me dissatisfied forever. So I don't know. I don't know what my point is there. I guess just like, if you're into Wheel of Time, maybe give it a chance, and if you're predisposed to hate it because it makes changes, then just have the attitude of like, hey, you're never gonna get the adaptation that you actually want ever.
Mm-hmm.
So just try to appreciate this, I guess.
Yeah, I like that. All right. Well, I think that's it, right?
Yeah.
I will check out Wheel of Time, and I will catch back up with you, see how we're doing as we get further into the season.
Sounds good.
Didn't they replace an actor? Didn't the guy who played Matt walk?
Yeah, they did. And I like the new guy. In fact, maybe a little more than the original guy. So I'm happy with that. Okay. Yeah.
Cool. Well, we will check it out and check back, and I'll let you know how the end of The Flash goes.
Awesome. Can't wait.
I got to the part where they met Batman, and
you cringed and had to stop it.
So sad.
Yeah,
it makes me so sad. Anyway, that is all we had for you folks this week. If you have any opinions on Stanley Kubrick's Barry Lyndon, on the summer box office, or on Wheel of Time, please let us know. You can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com, or over on our Twitter account at doofmedia, or you can go to Reddit. That's reddit.com/r/doofmedia, where you will find a thread for this episode where you can chat all about it there.
That's right. And if you're not already subscribed to the Doofcast, then please go head on over to your most convenient podcatcher. Give us a subscribe. We'd really appreciate it.
And if you like what we do here and want to support us, consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. Head on over to patreon.com/Doof Media and pledge at any of the available levels. There's a whole bunch of cool stuff, including bonus content, the ability to vote in fan art contests and writing contests, in book clubs. We actually have our book club coming up here on Friday, tomorrow. Today, as you're listening to this, the 8th, we're going to be talking all about A Clockwork Orange. Speaking of Mr. Kubrick, we're going to be talking about that book tomorrow night. And we do not have a poll up right now for the book club, and that's because we're taking a break for the month of September due to the aforementioned baby that's going to be barreling its way into my life here in exactly 2 weeks.
Yep.
So, but we are going to be talking about A Clockwork Orange tomorrow night, and I think you don't want to miss that, because I think it's going to be a really, really good conversation.
Yeah, me too. I'm really excited about that. Also, please consider rating and reviewing the Doofcast on Apple Podcasts. Each review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
All right, folks, that is going to do it for the week. We will be back next week with a new episode in our Blind Spots series. As I already said, my third pick is coming up. We're going to be watching Jacques Tati's Playtime. I can't wait.
Sounds fun.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.